Hello and welcome everybody, it's Joshino, and today I am going to be talking about the social differences in the American and European servers on Planetside 2. So I've started playing a lot more on American servers now. Basically, when it gets to about 11 o'clock and the EU servers are winding down, I'll hop over to Emerald. And I just didn't realise how big of a difference there was in the way that people interact in the game. I have talked about how proxy chat and Yell is used a lot more in the American servers than European servers, but I really wanted to go in a bit more depth, and I was looking at a lot of papers. I was trying to find some sociological papers, but there's nothing really academic out there saying, oh, Americans are louder or Europeans are quieter, and there's just lots of opinion pieces, but I will take the opinions and try and break them down. So, if you didn't realise, if you were playing on the US server or you're playing on the European server and you've never been to the other ones, the difference on the US server to the EU server is that in general play on the EU server, people won't talk to each other in proxy chats. It's very uncommon for that to happen. Whereas in the US server, almost in any base where there's lots of people, there'll be at least one person talking and either shouting orders or generally just chatting. And similarly, in most public platoons on EU servers, nobody talks, and unless it's the leader, and maybe somebody will butt in, but that's uncommon. A lot of the time, most of the public platoons are just completely silent and nobody talks. Maybe they'll use the actual platoon chat in text, but actually using the microphone is almost sacrilegious. Whereas, if you go on an American server, I don't think I've been in a platoon where at least the platoon leader hasn't spoken, and then maybe some of their officers, but it happens a lot in public platoons that everybody is talking. Yesterday, I was in a platoon, and they were talking for about half an hour deciding where to go. To be honest, they wanted to go to a base, the Palisade, which had no enemies there at the time. And they took half an hour to decide to get there, and then eventually, what happened was they left the warp gate, and then got blown up straight away by a galaxy that rammed them, and a whole galaxy died. I just sat there, and I couldn't stop laughing. And to say this, that there isn't a good or a bad with the using the microphone. In some ways, it's good that people are using the microphone because it adds a lot more depth to the game. Because it makes you think that you're actually in an MMO game and that you're barking orders at each other and you're actually in this sort of warfare simulator where people will be screaming, they'll be shouting. And as I said, in the EU servers, people do talk and there are loud people and people that spam mics. But I've played a lot and I hardly ever come across somebody using proxy chat. And it's very uncommon for people to use platoon chat unless they are actually barking orders or they know each other. I think this is quite an important point actually, that there are a lot of TeamSpeak servers for the EU outfits, and almost every outfit will have their own TeamSpeak, and that's where people will do their talking. And I think that's a bit of a difference between the US servers and the EU servers. The EU players tend to not be as open with strangers, whereas they're happy to go and chat and chinwag with their outfit members, and there are plenty of loud Europeans, but you have to find them on the TeamSpeak rather than in the game. So why is there this difference in the server, and what did I dig out culturally? Well, some magazines suggested that Americans were louder because of the cultural sort of importance placed on individualism. You know, the whole laissez-faire, rugged individualism. One person can become a master of the universe, like everyone is special. And it's basically said that everybody is basically in a competition to try and get their ideas across. So everyone's used to talking fairly loudly, trying to push their idea across. But I wasn't completely convinced by this argument because it's not uncommon in European schools and especially in British schools to emphasize the individual importance and the fact that everybody is special. I think a lot of people think this way now. Maybe it's changed, maybe it's shifted, but it's not that the individual is completely overlooked in Europe. And especially, I'd say that British people are a lot less open to talking to strangers, but when I've been to Germany and I've been to Eastern Europe, people are quite a lot more open and tend to be more easy to engage. And I don't think that it hits the nail on the head. And I think looking at cultural reasons why Europeans are quieter is that there are so many different languages. Not everybody is proficient in English, and some people, you talk to people that have really good English, it's perfectly fine, but they're really shy about how good their English is. And I think that perhaps people that don't use proxy chat are worried that their English won't get across or they'll be ridiculed. And this is something that culturally, perhaps French, German, whatever communities sort of tend to stick together, and that's why they have those TeamSpeak servers and why they keep themselves separate from the rest of the server and they don't use proxy chat and things like that. Although American servers also have Brazilians, maybe a bit more realistic than the idea of being special is that Americans really value culturally outgoing characteristics and being confident to the point of perhaps being arrogant. Whereas introversion and keeping to yourself is seen in a very negative light. And this one I find hard to account for because obviously I'm not living in America. I don't really know American culture apart from films where I guess that is portrayed, where you have the jocks and the everybody that's outgoing. Another argument I read was that culturally Americans across the ages as well as just up to present day are living in less densely populated areas. So I don't know how scientific it was, but there was a report that basically said that Europeans preferred to speak about 2 to 3 feet apart, whereas Americans preferred to speak 4 feet apart, meaning that basically they raised their voice because of the distance between them, and that's where they get the loudness. But it doesn't explain why people would be talking in game, but it does sort of show how perhaps people have to get people's attention to get to talk to them at 4 meters, whereas Europeans may be more close. They like to talk to people a bit more who they're comfortable with. I suppose if you are close to somebody, you are going to be more comfortable with them. You're not going to feel threatened. I don't know about that one. I was also reading a lot of stuff, and there's just, I don't know, they're really bad stereotypes about just how prudish Europeans were. There was one about French people, and it said that if you looked a French person in the eye, it was considered wrong, and you're basically flirting with them. But I mean, that's just not relevant anymore. You're not gonna accidentally look somebody in the eye and think that you're like massive pervert. But yeah, I think it's hard to go about this without looking too much into stereotypes and saying, oh, Americans are loud or Europeans are really shy. But I do think that there must be something there that encourages you to talk, and talk loudly to absolutely everybody. Anyway, it's nice to have a change of pace and to see something different, and it is interesting to go onto an American server and have a different environment to a European server. The talking is definitely something that I notice every time that I'm on, whereas in the EU server, I feel like I'm playing alone a lot of the time unless I'm with my outfit mates. Anyway, what does everyone else think? Does anyone else have any different reasons for this sort of cultural difference, or do you think it doesn't exist? Do you think it's a load of baloney? If you maybe, that's American lingo. Also, yeah, probably something to mention is that I'm fairly sure there'd be a difference between city goers who are on subways and things and probably have a similar mannerism to Londoners, that they just don't want to talk to anybody and that you may as well just not exist in their world. Whereas probably a lot of rural Americans probably a bit louder, and to some respects, in where I live, in a village, you do say hi to everybody when you're walking down the street. It's not uncommon to say, hello, how are you, and then to walk on. Whereas in the city, you said hello, how are you to somebody in the street, like where I work, they'd be like, what the fuck, mate? What you chatting about? And then you'd walk on and be like, oh, that wasn't nice. I'm going to go now. So, yeah, thank you for watching. I was interrupted halfway between doing this with the Steam controller arrival, and tomorrow I think I'll get out a first impressions, as I've been playing games all day with it, and having a lot of fun, and also I've come to some critical conclusions. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, everybody, Joshino.